That boy ain't right.
As a child, I quickly became aware of the generation gap between my father and myself. You see, he grew up in a world that taught him the value of a firm handshake to get a job. A world where a single income could support an entire family. And a world where, even though America was invincible, he knew to keep an eye out for any Soviet agents hiding behind any bushes. Or wherever it is that Soviet agents are supposed to hide. I, however, grew up in a world where I learned that every job now wants a multi-interview process, and even if you interview well, you may not get a second callback. I grew up in a shrinking economy, and I have first-hand knowledge that no, America is not untouchable to our enemies. This generation gap led to many arguments between my father and myself. Arguments that at their core saw a boomer trying to prepare a millennial for a world that no longer existed, with information that was outdated and no longer relevant. I don't blame my father. He was a busy man. He worked 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day just to put food on our table. And while he was at work, the world changed and moved past him. It happens to everyone eventually. My father and I just grew up in two very different generations. He grew up watching Ward Cleaver and Andy Griffith. I grew up watching Homer Simpson and Peter Griffin. I know I wasn't the only kid in the 90s who would grow up with working parents. I'm all too familiar with what it's like to only see your parents at the end of the day, when they get home later than you by a few hours, when they've had to spend a large amount of their energy at work and are now around their family at only about 30% battery level. Maybe that's why TV dads in the 80s to the 2000s were almost always shown as being out of touch with their families. Our media reflecting our psyches back at ourselves in a comedic format. For some reason, the role of the father in the American media has gone from the strong pillar of the family and the foundation of wisdom for his children to the out-of-touch oaf, or the oblivious lout who takes everyone for granted. It paints a bleak picture of what we are telling ourselves about how we view our fathers and their role in our society. However, there was one 90s father that stood out as a bright example of a man to whom we can all proudly pin the label of father. A shining city on a hill, and that city is powered by clean, economical, efficient propane. Now, follow along as I show you why Hank Hill is the greatest television father in American media. King of the Hill is a show that gives us a slice of down-home Texas Americana that is clearly set in the 1990s.
Hank, found one!
Now hold on, Dale. I want to make sure it's Y2K compliant because Peggy's K-Pro evidently is not.
Hank Hill is our show's protagonist, a man who loves his country, his profession, and his family, even if he doesn't quite understand them all the time. And that's the show's central theme, at least between Hank and Bobby. Hank doesn't understand his son Bobby. He doesn't get his music, he doesn't get his jokes, and he really doesn't understand why Bobby doesn't want to sell propane and propane accessories and play football like his old man. Of course, a show like King of the Hill has numerous interweaving storylines across a plethora of unforgettable characters. Hank's struggle in trying to find a way to connect with his son, oftentimes failing before ultimately succeeding in the episode, seems to be the central theme throughout the entirety of the series. We, the audience, are introduced to this central theme as early as the pilot episode. Early in the episode, we see the Hills driving their son Bobby to his Little League game. On the way, they discuss why Bobby should always be trying to give 110% in everything he does. During his first time at bat, Bobby actually manages to get on first base. Things seem to be going well for our little Hill, right up until this point.
Hey, don't look at me! Keep your eye on the ball!
Keep my eye on the what?
Stop looking at me, boy! Watch the ball!
Can't hear you, Dad.
Oof! This leaves Bobby with a black eye for the rest of the episode. On the way home from the game, the Hill family makes a stop at their local, totally not a Walmart, to do some shopping. Hank is trying to find some home repair items, and really, he only wants to know where the hardware section is located. Unfortunately, the brand safe employee is unhelpful. I mean, yeah, it is Buckley.
There's no yelling in the propane department. Some of these gases are extremely volubilous.
Hank has finally had enough and loses his cool with Buckley. And unfortunately for him, he also loses his cool right in front of two onlookers. They see a raging dad and a kid with a black eye, and they make the obvious, but obviously wrong conclusion.
Do you know what a hammer is? That's what I want, a damned hammer. Now where in the hell would I go?
Hey, that's that Hank Hill fella that lives on the block next to us.
He sure has a temper, doesn't he?
Sure does. Makes you wonder who gave his boy that black.
From there, word gets around to the small town of Arlen, Texas, and before Hank knows it, he's been reported to Arlen's CPS by some concerned citizen. This prompts a wellness check on the Hill family home. And as if things weren't already looking good for Hank, in a scene earlier, Peggy receives a welt on her face due to Bobby's toss of a baseball. He misses the wall entirely and hits his mom. An accident, remember, Bobby's not really an athlete. But to make matters worse, Hank is also having some issues with his truck, and his neighbor helping him with repairs only makes things worse.
Ow! My arm! Ow, my head! Ow!
This all accumulates into the absolute worst first impression Hank could make on the caseworker, who sees a clearly out-of-control man, a battered wife, and an abused son.
I work for a living, and I mean real work, not writing down gobbledygook. I provide the people of this community with propane and propane accessories. Oh, when I think of all my hard-earned tax dollars going to pay a bunch of little twig boy bureaucrats like you, it just makes me want to...
Preach, Hank. Preach.
God, it just...
Hank?
Honey, bring me my BC headache powder and a glass of water.
All right, Hank.
The caseworker firmly believes that Hank is abusing his family, so he sets appointments with each of Hank's neighbors, each of whom fervently claim that Hank loves Bobby and would never hit his son. However, the damage is done. Each neighbor is left wondering just how well they actually know Hank. Is he really the lovable neighbor he appears to be? Or has he been secretly abusing his wife and son for years unnoticed? From this point, Bobby notices a shift in his father's personality. Hank, now feeling under the scrutiny of the neighborhood, doesn't know how to properly parent his boy. Is he letting anger get the better of him? Are his parenting methods outdated? Harmful even? While Hank faces this inward journey, Bobby is having the time of his life.
Bobby! Hey! Please, respect my fence's right to be a fence.
Bobby realizes that he can get away with almost anything now. He goes on a rampage for a short while, but as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. The Hill household receives a phone call from the CPS office. However, Bobby is the only one home to answer. As it turns out, the overzealous caseworker neglected to talk to anyone who was at Bobby's Little League game. You know, a witness who could corroborate Hank's story that Bobby's black eye came from a baseball to the face. The CPS agent tells Bobby that the case against his father is being dropped, and then asks Bobby to let his father know. But Bobby decides to keep this information to himself. Bobby continues to live his life free of any real consequences from Hank. Eventually, the head of the CPS office stops by, speaks to Peggy, and wants to extend his personal apology for any damages his overzealous employee may have caused the Hill family. Peggy confronts Bobby with the knowledge that the investigation has been called off, only for Bobby to break down and reveal his true motives for keeping the phone call secret.
I can make him love me even when I screw up.
Bobby knows all too well the gulf separating his father and his own interests. Bobby knows that he's not like Hank, and he doesn't need a reminder. Bobby doesn't need Hank to understand him. He just needs his father to love him. Peggy quickly decides to break the good news to Hank that the investigation has been called off. She also decides to take the time to confront Hank about Bobby's feelings. And Hank, moved by his son's plight, has the most fatherly response a man in his situation could give.
You can relax. The investigation has been off for a week, only Bobby didn't tell us.
I'll kill him!
Peggy urges Hank to sit down with Bobby, to express his feelings, to have an open and honest dialogue with his son, and most importantly, to tell him that he loves him. However, it's not that easy for Hank.
That's crazy. Course I love him.
See, good. Now, say it to Bobby.
What are you talking about?
Of course, we know Hank loves Bobby. He even states so plainly to Peggy. During this conversation, we also find that Hank was raised by a terrible example of fatherhood.
I got my shins blown off by a Japan man's machine gun. So don't come crying to me with your problems.
Hank's father, Cotton Hill, is many things. A war hero, a leader amongst his peers, and a tough-as-nails sumbitch. But the one thing Cotton is not is a good father. From the pilot episode, we find a deep family secret. Hank has trouble connecting with his son because he had trouble connecting with his own father, and it was all due to Cotton's abrasive and abusive style of parenting. Throughout the series, we will see examples of just keep getting worse and worse, and Cotton seems to spare no effort in verbally and emotionally cutting down his own flesh and blood. But Hank is not like Cotton, and thank God for that. It's never confirmed on screen, but I like to think that Hank made a solemn vow to be a better father to his children than Cotton ever was to him. Hank mans up and decides that he needs to have a one-on-one with his son, where he plainly states how much he loves him.
Okay. I love you no matter what you do there. Phew! Let's go get something to eat.
I'm not just a big disappointment to you.
Disappointment? No, you make me proud. I've been disappointed by just about everything else in this town, but you? Not once. Damn it, you're my boy.
And now at the end of the pilot episode, we can clearly see that the backbone of the show is the juxtaposition of Hank and his son. They don't really work together, but man, do they ever work well together as the father-son comedy duo of the series. The writers have used this juxtaposition as a tool, especially in their cold opens. Like this in the first episode of Season 2, where Hank has clearly talked Bobby into some sort of test of accuracy, throwing ping pong balls at a state fair. Bobby, however, is not into this, and seemingly disregards his father's advice, and he does this.
That boy ain't right.
This joke really only works as a cold open, and it really only works because the audience knows the basic relationship between Hank and Bobby. It's also useful to set up the rest of the episode. After the show titles and the first round of commercials were done, audiences in the 90s would already be primed for a King of the Hill sports-related episode. When we pick up with the real first act, we find the Hill family still at the state fair. And a booth has caught Bobby's eye. As it turns out, Bobby is a natural deadeye, downing duck after duck after duck.
Bobby, way to kill ducks.
And look at how happy Hank is. Hunting is a sport loved by many a Texan, and Bobby just showed interest and proficiency in something. Hank is elated. He even brags to Peggy on their way home.
He must have killed 1,000 ducks.
By now, audiences only had a single season under their belt, so most understood that Hank being this proud of Bobby is something special. Excited at this new prospect of seeing his son succeed in some sort of sport, Hank decides that he's going to go all in and support his son. He gets some time at a gun range to practice.
I didn't know it was loaded is not an acceptable excuse. I wasn't there, or I never met those people, are better excuses.
Sage Texas wisdom. And even buys Bobby his very first rifle.
Where's the children's gun section?
Aisle 47.
Man, God bless Texas. Hank even gets a moment to live every good father's dream, watching his son be publicly praised for something he did.
Oh my God!
Boy can shoot.
Hell yeah, he's my boy.
The stranger then asks if Bobby and Hank are planning on attending this year's Arlen Gun Range father-son shootout. Bobby's excited, but Hank, well, let's just say it's been a while since Hank has actually held a rifle.
The last time I shot a .22, but I'll bet you there was a Texan in the White House. And I ain't talking about Herbert Walker Bush either.
Before he can shoot, Hank has a terrible flashback.
What are you waiting for, boy? Pull the trigger! Make some noise! You're never gonna be a war hero like me if you shoot like that. No wonder that kid from the playground stole your pail. He knows you can't shoot.
Perhaps the real reason Hank hasn't been shooting since LBJ was in office is because it reminds him too much of the painful experiences he had with his father. Throughout the series, we can be certain that Cotton will always be there to torment his son Hank.
I think you cut my ear.
I think you cry more than the guy I killed out from under that helmet.
It doesn't matter if it's a horrible memory Hank has, or if it's an event in modern day. Cotton Hill just does not like his son.
I know we don't say it enough, or at all, I guess, but I love you too, Dad.
You loves me?
Dad?
What kind of man tells another man he loves him? I don't want to die with my sissy son who loves me. You gonna bring me roses 'cause you love me?
Hank is now in a real dilemma. He doesn't want to back out of the father-son shootout that he has planned with Bobby, but he can't bring himself to shoot straight. Every time he picks up a rifle, all he hears is his father mocking him in his own mind. A horrible fate for any man, let alone any Texan. Now, Hank has finally found something he can bond with his young son over, and it's almost completely taken away from him. He'll spend most of the rest of this episode trying to power through it and find a way to overcome his issues on his own. Meanwhile, never letting Bobby know any different. Unfortunately, later in that episode, Hank will get into an argument with some of his neighbors and let it loose that,
Haven't you been listening to me? I'm not going to shoot in any contest. Sorry, Bobby.
Bobby is absolutely devastated. In his mind, his father can do no wrong. In his mind, his father is the perfect shot. So, obviously, the reason why Hank doesn't want to shoot with Bobby is because, well, Bobby's just not very good at shooting. Of course, we in the audience know that's not the case at all. But Bobby doesn't know about the relationship between Cotton and his father. Peggy will eventually talk some sense into Hank, letting him know that Bobby really just wants to spend time with him. Bobby won't look down on his father if it turns out that Hank isn't a good shot. And moved by his wife's wise words, Hank decides to go seek out help from a kooky sports psychologist we met earlier in the episode.
I don't believe in that gobbledygook about a subconscious or any other witchcraft. I won't take pills, I won't let you hypnotize or molest me.
Well, I can help you without using witchcraft, pills, and molestation, but it won't be easy.
The sports psychologist helps Hank through his issues by teaching him to visualize success rather than focus on his father's voice inside his head. This turns out to be a major success, and the day of the father-son shootout, Hank and Bobby go to town.
Come on, Dad. Let's go bag us a trophy.
And, have fun.
Just look at how happy Hank is here. He's not happy because he can shoot. He's happy because he's spending time with his boy. And wouldn't you know it, soon Hank and Bobby are on the leaderboard. Only in second place, poised and ready to take out last year's champions. There's just one problem. One shinless problem.
That means we're tied for first.
Sorry I'm late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
Yep, Cotton came to see his grandson shoot. Move over, Elton John. The real bitch is back.
I'm always here to support my Bobby, and I'll give you a shoulder to cry on. You'll need one, won't he, Hank?
Quick, Hank, hit him with a rifle butt.
Kill him now. Do it.
Cotton is, well, he's Cotton. Of course he'd show up right at the end of the contest, if only just to torment his son.
Come on, Hank. I got money riding on this shot. On the McKays.
But our boy Hank isn't about to let his father get him down. He steps up, takes aim, and...
Let's do it. Miss.
And the McKays win again.
And that's that. Hank lost twice. First, his father got to see him fail. And secondly, he let down his boy. Although, things aren't quite as bleak as Hank would like to think.
We did it, Dad! Second place in a real father-son tournament. Can I put it on my wall? We were so good out there. We should always be shooting. This is the best day ever. You're the best dad ever. I'm the best son ever. Can we do it again next year?
Yeah. Yeah, we can do it again, if that's what you want.
And that right there is what makes Hank Rutherford Hill the absolute blueprint for a modern father. Is he perfect? No, of course not. No father can be perfect. But Hank tries. Hank continues to improve on his relationship with his son throughout the rest of the series, later taking an interest in some of the things Bobby has taken interest in, just so he can hang out with his son. Hank is often quoted as saying, "That boy ain't right," and we tend to interpret this as Hank disparaging his son, or Hank wishing his son was better, more manly, more like him. But I see it a different way. See, throughout King of the Hill, Hank's journey is just to help Bobby find out who Bobby is. Over the countless examples of all the zany antics the pair of them will get into, the one consistent theme is that once Bobby is interested in something, Hank is right there by his side. Hank came to the realization that his boy is in fact right. He just had to realize who his boy was. And that is why Hank Hill will always be dad number one. I want to extend a hearty Texas-sized thank you to all of those who stayed to the end of the video. You know, in King of the Hill fan circles, it's common for us fans to discuss who our favorite character is, or if we happen to see ourselves as a character. So I know some of you are probably wondering if I see myself more as a Hank or a Bobby. In reality, based on my life, I'd have to say I'm Bill.
I'm fat, and I'm old, and every day I'm just gonna wake up fatter and older. I'm out there digging holes, falling into them, climbing out, trying again, and tomorrow I'm gonna hang outside at a ladies' prison.